Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Woven Podcast, a way of living your uniqueness. We are your hosts, Danita and Brea. Here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Oh, I missed that note.
We all miss a few notes in life, Danita.
I know. But you know what? This song came to me because for so long in life, I thought I was on like this road alone. It was like I was all by myself. I have come to find that, well, there's, half the population or however much the percentages of female population, we all go through such similar things. So we have a guest on today, Amy Berryhill, and she's going to chat with us about something that all women go through. We're going to get into the nitty, the gritty, the beautiful, the amazing, the wonderful part of being a woman, which is menstruating.
Amy, it's so good to have you here. Thank you so much. We started this conversation, I think, a few weeks ago. I had no idea growing up. It's the same story we often hear. It was, one, we don't even talk about your period. Somehow I remember at some point, I can't remember who gave me a tampon, which by the way, I don't even use those now. So then you go down this whole other hole and that becomes not part of it, but maybe we'll get into that today or in a subsequent podcast and trying to figure it out. I didn't know I had a place for a tampon to go. No, yeah, really. Like this is what it was. I was at the swimming pool. My friend passes me one of those OB ones, the little short ones underneath the stall. She's like, Brea, just stick this in. And I'm like, I'm looking at this thing like, where does this go? It was like 30 minutes of pain of me like poking all over the place. I had no idea. So this is like my entry point into like what the cycle is, into the bleed. And from there, this carried on as a place of complete ignorance. Nothing that I looked at, nothing that I felt, just like try to get through it, pretend it's not there, get through it as fast as possible. And I think this is like a story that is really common for a lot of women.
You know, it's so wild, Brea, as you were saying that so many women that I've talked to have the initial bleeding story. My first bleed, I remember I was getting ready for a family trip to California. And so we were going to be in the ocean. And it was my mom like, Amy, just stick it in. Come on, you're going to go swimming. And I was like, what do you mean? And like when we're tensing, there's obviously no receptivity. We don't feel safe. And so it just creates this whole distortion in our bodies. So many other women, I just find this interesting thread around water being such a symbol of the feminine and the blood. And it's like we're around the water as it's coming. So I don't know. I just felt that was interesting.
Well, from an energetic perspective, it probably makes so much sense, right? Like, what is one of our favorite things to do when we have our cycle? Like when we're bleeding, for me, it's to have a bath, right? It's to be in the water, just allowing it to flow, allowing it just to be there. It's soothing. It feels warm. It's nourishing on our body, on our stomachs, on our digestive organs, everything. Yeah, it makes so much sense. As I learned and got to know my body more, it's all about allowing the blood to just come out and not trying to stop it, not trying to prevent it, and getting to actually know it. And I think that's why we have you here today.
On the topic of free bleeding, that is the number one practice way. If women would really embrace, so many other health problems would like domino and dissolve away. Because allowing our blood to flow freely, I mean, you just said it, it's like there's something so primal in us that wants that. And for me, practicing free bleeding, like I'd no longer get menstrual cramps. So many other health mysteries have cleared away. And I truly believe that if we can embrace our natural, like the blood is falling out down to the earth because it is meant to fall down to the earth, there is something so beautiful that becomes intact in our bodies from that. I just got chills as I said that, but this is the number one thing for any woman listening right now. I know there can be this taboo around it or the mess or the kind of practical stuff, but it is such a life-changing practice that reorients your entire relationship to your body.
For so many people, one, they probably want to know what free bleeding even is. And we just went from like A to Z. It's like, and the and the blood is falling to the ground. I like period panties. That's where my comfort is. And I also know lots of people that are like actually spending that time out in the earth, in the gardens, aligned to come out. So do you want to talk a little bit about like the different levels, layers of free bleeding, and probably just going right into the cycle, like what that means? Because really, it doesn't really matter what you do as much as you're bringing in an awareness to it and you start listening to your body. And then you're like, actually, this is what my bleed is trying to say. Like there's kind of like this conversation in it that I think is really easy to glaze over and to not hear, because we're just like, again, tampons in, we pretend it's not there, we deal with the cramps, maybe we take some drugs to make it less, and then we move on and we miss that conversation
Oh my
that our
gosh,
bodies
yes,
have with us.
100%. It is the menstrual cycle, and specifically our blood, is such a reflection of what is happening in our life. When we have, let's say, a very painful bleed, it's uncomfortable or we're super anxious or whatever, that to me is such an indication of something deeper in our life. And so when we, take Advil or shove it down, we're actually missing some of the deepest alchemy available to us. And it is our body communicating. I've had pretty much painless, harmonious bleeds for many years now since I started, connecting more deeply to my cycle, nutrition, herbs, practices, all sorts of stuff. This past April, I was contemplating moving somewhere, and I went there for a few weeks and my whole body flared up and I had menstrual cramps that felt like a knife up through my uterus. I was doubled over in the tub at 3 a.m. And it was such a clear, no, this is not where you're supposed to be. And then that guided me to where I am now, which feels like home and this beautiful, like really where I know I'm supposed to be. And these little moments, seemingly little, that our bleed really shows us can guide us throughout our life. And so if we have a bleed that's very painful or again, extremely uncomfortable, if we look deeper at what is happening in my life, what am I subtly a no to that I'm still allowing? Where am I denying my inner truth? Where am I pushing where I really could benefit from softening around? And when a woman turns to this inner dialogue around her blood and right before her blood, I've seen some miraculous shifts in problems just clearing themselves up and other things, completely shifting. For me, it's just around honoring exactly what is happening and using that as wisdom rather than, oh, something's wrong with me or blood is such a burden, because it's only a burden because our society has made it that way.
Absolutely. And I just want to add first I want to ask, what's a quality bleed? Like, what would you consider a quality bleed?
When blood is bright red and there's not many clumps, like for me, if there's clumps in blood, that is like a stagnation. That's an inner resistance. That's emotional blockage. And sometimes when I do still experience that, I will have maybe a big emotional release or I'll clear something up in my life and then the blood will start to flow again. So for me, it's around having bright red, flowing blood, really being able to tap into the deeper mystical layer. So if you're in so much pain that it's more agonizing than erotic and replenishing, I would say there's something to look at there. And also, if it doesn't come around the same day or it's always late, always early, to me, that would signify something is off. So I would say it's the bright red, it's flowing, and there's an ability to tap into the deeper intuition because your body is comfortable and feels safe enough to feel that. So I hope that lands or makes sense.
It does land. I was diagnosed with endometriosis for, I don't know, years, and symptoms, all different types of symptoms. When I was, 14, I was in at the doctor's and it was like painful menstruation and really long periods, like 10 to 14 days. And then, it was like, well, I guess that's normal. So you should go on birth control. So then, you try birth control and then you go off birth control because that has its own set of challenges. But then what comes with it is like all of these other symptoms that you notice and you see. And so I think people can notice that there might be something wrong but they don't know where to look or where to go, because it's like, I knew that there was painful menstruation, and like I knew it was really deep and it was affecting me, like it was debilitating. And yet it was like, okay, I'll just have another surgery. I'll go to more doctor's appointments. I'll look somewhere externally for some sort of answer, but you didn't know where to go and how deep the issue really was. Like you just kind of thought, okay, if I get it fixed, if I get the blood fixed, then everything will be okay. But that's not really what it was. It was like I needed to really follow what that meant and what it was connected to, which, as you said, like can be like an emotional release or some sort of shift within your life, and listening to it.
If I'm working with someone and they're like, I don't really know where I'm at in my cycle, whatever. I'm like, okay, so when your blood arrives, and if it's late, there's lots of, herbal protocols, energetic protocols to call her back in. But having the container of 2 days, if you can, or even just one full day of deep listening. And there's sometimes resistance here because it's like, well, like emails and things. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Life is busy. But what if you took one day to deeply listen to what your body is saying, and then using that, because every body is different. And so typically when we have that first day of letting the blood come, letting there be pain if there's pain, noticing the color, noticing the texture, and then using that as the information forward so that okay, so my blood is, very brown, or I feel like extremely lethargic or extremely irritable. These are all signs that then we can work with, because not everyone has the same bodily wisdom. Like some women, there's stagnation. So it's like you could actually benefit from more fiery movement, from clearing. And then other women are go, 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 very in that hyper doing, where it's like you actually need to deeply rest. And so I feel like starting from, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, where do I start? And I want to connect with my blood, wait till she arrives and then commit to the listening, and then journal about it, really feel what's happening. And then from then on, I promise you, you will receive at least one insight of where to look or who to reach out to, or a practice. Like, this is the miracle, like the miracle space of the blood, is that when we deeply listen, she gives us clues that no teacher or coach or guide or guru could ever give us. Like, we have it inside of us. And this is why I love the blood mysteries, and I have so much reverence for them, because they are physiological and physical and scientific, but there's also this unexplainable gnosis that lives inside of women that as a culture we've been taught to distrust. And so I would say if you start there and truly believe that your body has wisdom, she will show you something. But it takes courage to be like, to go that route. But every woman who I've seen do that has received really beautiful guidance moving forward.
I just wanted to ask a little bit about why we think women are so scared of the blood, like in general. I feel a lot of women, when they notice it, the first thing is just like, I got to take care of it somehow. Like I don't even want to look at it.
Like, I remember when I first learned that some people will either allow themselves to bleed and they'll collect some of it, or they'll bleed into the cup and they'll remove it and then they'll use it to nourish their gardens. They'll mix, like, there's this whole blood world out there that I think most people have no idea. And also, we don't have to do all of that. It's not at all that either. But I just know that the information of like the infinite amount of wisdom that's in it, but also, how we hold that, what works for us, which again, I think comes for like what you're talking about, the mystery of it. What is your inner truth saying? What is that wisdom within you? It's not for anybody else. And then we can get carried away, because you can also go down this road where people have protocols. You need to do this with your blood. You need to sit like this. You need to eat this. And then we get into this whole exact thing that we're trying to get away from, which is rules, 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 and how things have to look and what you're supposed to do, which again takes us out of it.
This is one of the things that kind of drives me crazy, is like the dogma within feminine wisdom. And I'm like, y'all, this is a paradox. You understand that she breaks the barriers of all dogma because she is that which is primordial inside of us. It cannot be caged. One of the things in like the wellness and spiritual world that drives me crazy, and I sense y'all are on the similar thread, is this, what does the guru have to say? What is the perfect protocol? When the whole point of this path, the whole point of reclaiming our true selves is about listening to what is true within us, which cannot actually be boxed. And so when you're taking that a level deeper to feminine wisdom, which is inside the womb that birthed the world and that pulses through the earth and makes, the oceans swell and the sun shine, and it's pleasure and grief and ecstasy. It's this chaotic force of truth that lives inside of us. When we start to capture that and then create certain protocols around what is right or wrong and gaslight people into, when they have an inner truth emerging, we're saying, well, no, that's wrong because this expert said this. I believe we are actually doing ourselves such a disservice. And true feminine nourishment is about listening to that deep inner call, the pulse of truth inside of our womb, whatever you want to call it, and allowing that to guide you. When we start to get dogmatic around it, we're off. And I think anytime I hear someone really like preachy around it, there's a little bit of a natural pullback. For a long time, resting like the whole day while I was bleeding was extremely nourishing for me. And then I started picking up on all of the teachings that that's exactly when you rest. If you're pushing yourself out of that, you're harming your body. Well, there have been a few bleeds where my body was craving to lift weights and sweat and run in the woods.
Hopefully naked. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking because that's like,
if I can. The times where I was denying that, I was like, well, I feel achy and irritated, and like the teaching of like rest would kind of come in and take me away from the gnosis. And when I started embracing that and allowing each cycle to not be regimented with rituals, but actually, hey, what's the truth of this cycle? Because she's different every time. And allowing that to guide I feel like I've gone even a layer deeper, which I didn't think was possible. And so that's what I mean by the dogma being, I don't believe that's really helping us. I think it's just another way we come far away from it.
Oh, I love that so much. This is the message of our work too, like in general, which we can all bring forward into the world, but it's coming to just the part that's so important is the pausing to listen to ourselves and what really is true for us in any moment. And this is wherever we are in our cycle, whether we're bleeding or not. It's just like that pause during the day, maybe a few times a day, where we're like, well, what's really true for me? Well, what is my body saying to me right now? What's happening? Where are my emotions at? What's going on? And we have just lost sight of that. And then if we do actually tune into that, then we've learned all the dogma around now we need to judge it because something's wrong. We need to fix something. We need to do something. And now we go into the whole self-help world where there's 100 gurus telling us all the things we need to do to make things better. And we've just lost it again in a whole
And the
other
whole
way.
point of this is to enjoy our lives.
how do I find pleasure in my bleed? So one, let's talk about like, I'm scared of the blood. So, okay, now first off, I'm scared to even look at the blood. Now, how am I finding joy in that time? Because I am irritable. I'm a little bitchy. I like don't really like people and I want to be by myself. But I have to work 9 to 5 and my kids are going around to all their stuff. There's just so much stuff that's happening. So how am I finding pleasure in that when I'm afraid of it and I'm busy?
First thing I would say is that if you are brand new to having a relationship with your blood, remember it's not going to explode into ecstasy the first time. Like your next blood might just be a listening bleed. So you might keep your whole life the same, but it's just that one day of listening.
How do I carve out the one day? Because this is what I feel. I feel like people hear this stuff and they're like, I can't carve out the one day. People are lucky that they have time to carve out the one day. I'm not one of those people. I don't have time for that. That's them fighting against themselves. If you're not going to carve out the day, if you're just going to just notice it, what do you do?
That becomes an inner job. And I can say this not from a just like, oh, that's what I would do, but I did this because I have worked many other jobs over the years where I am in deep reverence with my blood, but I am working, at this job in person, or I worked at coffee shops for a while, doing all sorts of stuff. And I would wake up and I'm like, oh, it's day one and I can't go bleed by the river like I would like to. So what I do is I got a really big baggy pair of black pants from Goodwill. They are my designated bleeding pants. And I tune into my blood as a protection around me. So maybe it's waking up a little earlier, lighting your candle, making tea, committing to no social media that day so you're getting as little stimulus input, and creating an energetic cloak around yourself for listening. And you might go through your day and do what you need to do. You might be showing up at a corporate job, but you are held in that. And then when you do have time that night, that's when you can go into the listening. But I would say work with what you have. And there's no ideal bleed. Don't compare yourself to someone who has the time to go frolic in the woods for their job and then you feel shame. We need turned on, like, deeply feminine women everywhere in corporate. There's no hierarchy right here. If you're really coming up against that story and you're scared of it too, is, also understanding the cultural conditioning around this. In every religion, the blood is seen as this darker, like, sacrifice. We're scared of it. It has been so, like, women are seen as not clean. I'm sure if y'all have been to, like, Bali or places with temples, there are signs that say you cannot enter if you are bleeding. You're dirty, right? So there's so much deep in our psyches programming around that being a dirty time that I think for me, just understanding that helps me soften around why it was so deep in my body. Of like, oh yeah, we've been fed this our whole lives. But if you start to look into, the goddess traditions, or The Red Tent is a beautiful book, and you start to also see the women and their stories of really embracing this, it creates this kinship around, like, among all of us, where we can soften around it and we can go into the world. And just the fact that if I go out into the world and I know I'm bleeding, I feel even more powerful. But I'm like, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm wearing all black. And just knowing that, like, I'm not going to be as social or magnetic or whatever. And just being like, that doesn't matter, because what matters is that I am in my body. And this protection that I have in myself right now is the most important thing. If you're bleeding and you're going out into the world, if you can reframe from that, because I think what trips up a lot of women is when they don't feel their open, exuberant selves. There's a story that that's wrong when we've just only praised certain aspects of the feminine as a culture. And then the darker inward oracle who births all the wisdom and gestates all the wisdom from within, it's seen as not as shiny, not as pretty, not as valuable, when we have to be the ones to, like, revalue that in ourselves. And so I would say, if you're scared of this part, what would it feel like to challenge that belief and just go deeper? Like, what beliefs do you have about your worth in who you are in the world? And there's probably something beautiful and rich for you in there.
I was raised Catholic. Blood was death. Like, it just was like, Jesus died on the cross, blood was death. You drank the blood, and that just meant death. So for me, as soon as I saw blood, it was like, am I dying? That was the connection that I had. So there is something deeper, and there is a structure there that's in place, and a system that really has impacted how I began my journey with blood. and then how that had to shift. It's been an actual tangible process of seeing how I am able to change the way that I feel about blood.
And it is a death. That's the beautiful thing too, is that the feminine's death in bleeding is so beautiful. And I want to touch back too on bringing joy and pleasure into this of what you said earlier, because I'm a very like circular kind of thinker, but as a culture, we have associated death with final end, sad, horrible, right? Like we've really created this forever summer is what I call it. Like the Western world, especially, is a very like we live in a forever summer, and we can't not slow down to really soften around the beauty of winter and death. It's like it has to be high all the time. And there is a beauty in letting go and the decay and like releasing what is no longer necessary. When you're really tuned into your blood, there is this, because there's so little mental energy available, everything extra gets like burned away from your field. What is true and real and the wisdom that you hold, it's like it gets distilled down into the body. And so when we get quiet enough to see that, and we're not judging ourselves for not having the mental capacity, but we're actually seeing that as, well, yeah, it's like I'm trimming the fat. It's not necessary right now. This is what's necessary.
Yeah, and I think there has been some studies actually on the scientific side that correlate the bleed and the fact that women menstruate with longer lives, because that is that time where we're releasing toxins. But even though that might be able to be studied, okay, there's this and this, and we can see that the emotional release, right? We get to die, we get to reset, we get to rebirth every month. And maybe that is correlated to a slightly longer life than men, but there's such a deep wisdom that I think is accessible to that. And it's so opposite to what we learn, because we learn it's going to hurt and there's going to be cramped and it's going to be painful and you're going to feel miserable. And I think when we try to just fight through all of that all the time rather than being able to pause. And I know for some people you can't, like you have to go to work no matter what. And gosh, I know that's hard. And also, is there a way that we can start to restructure our lives in some way? Partially, this has to do with society and community changing how we live. So this is a whole other bigger conversation around that. But where women are supported, because the cycle is very tangible, different for everyone, but it really comes about honoring ourselves and honoring others and listening to that wisdom within ourselves.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that in, because there is such a deep privilege in being able to build your life around your cycle. There's such an immense privilege that not everyone is able to do that. We can also carve out the time that we do have, and even like a 20-minute bath, deep, no phone, no scrolling, no extra. Like I think we also often forget about the power of simplicity and the time that is available to us that we fill with unnecessary stuff. And so, I've worked with a lot of people who are in corporate, single mothers and people who have so much on their plates. And my like voice in the ear is always like, but how can you weave that in right here? How can you make this right here sacred and honor your body in every situation? And so, yeah, it's a practice. And I think it takes a lot of internally like deconditioning of everything that we've been taught. And I love the piece around the longevity. And I'm like, of course it's related to everything gets a reset, everything gets a reset.
When you say that it's a privilege to listen to our bodies and make life changes because of things that are happening within our menstrual cycle that we might want to listen to, I think that, but I think it goes more than that. I think it's a discipline. Like, I think you notice that something's wrong. This is my personal experience. You notice something's wrong and it's so deeply wrong that you don't have a choice. It becomes either like, I'm going to do this or I'm going to suffer for the rest of my life. It's one or the other. There is a choice there in that moment of like, I'm going to go down this path of like hearing something that my body is telling me so that I can make a change for myself. And that might be changing careers. That might be changing partners. That might be like moving to a different place, like whatever it is for you that your moon cycle or blood is telling you, it's your choice. Like you have the choice to listen to it or you don't.
I want to add something else because to me, beyond it being a privilege, it's actually the harder path. It's like choosing the path of self discovery and self knowing means you're going actually against society, what we've been taught, all the patterns, the way everything is set up. And so it's a harder path. It's hard to make that time. It's hard to commit to sit there and listen to yourself. And yeah, it is harder in a way. It's a deep wisdom and unfolding and unknowing, but going through that and going on that journey isn't an easy choice to make.
At the end of it, after you've went down it, it seems like a lovely place to be. Like, wow, look at, I get to listen to my blood and see what's there. But the actual part of, deciding to follow that is really hard. It takes support from somewhere. Like you're going to find it in somewhere, somehow. It will be because something within you is telling you that there has to be something else.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for bringing that because I 100% agree. And every single person I know who is living from their truth, there was a gnarly path to get there. There was a choice of this is not working, like you said, Danita, and I can either stay in comfort or I can sacrifice something short term for the long term path. And I think it's also beautiful that blood is also a sacrifice, right? That's also religiously been that. So if we think about as a woman's life of really nourishing the deeper part of ourselves, yeah, we don't just get that. We don't just get to go frolic. Like there's a sacrifice and it's inconvenient. And also being in anxiety every day and being depressed and living a life that you hate is really inconvenient too. And like that sort of truth of like, we're here for a short time. What are we choosing? I think is another deeper thread within the cycle. It seems like it's not related, but it so is because every woman who I know who has had a deeply painful time with her bleed, there is some rich wisdom in there, but it's often not the easy path because if it was, everyone would be doing it.
Your bleed will amp itself up, 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 because your body that something's not right. And so it's going to just amp itself to the point that you're like, I can't deny it. Like it's right here. It's showing me, but now what?
The pain is a gift. It's like your life loves you so much that the tsunami is going to come destroy your life until you listen.
It's so true, but it's so damn inconvenient.
I'm like, your life is falling apart? Yes, you're doing it right, girl. On a very physical level, our cervix is extremely sensitive when we're bleeding. And so oftentimes women are, there's might be so much pain or so much disconnection that they can't even think about bringing pleasure in. And I totally get that. Like you never want to force, the womb is like a flower. She opens exactly when nature wants her to. You cannot force her. If you force her to open, there will be a consequence energetically and emotionally and physically. If you can have a gentle self-pleasure practice and work yourself up to having an orgasm or just bringing awareness and energy there, in my experience, it is so much more sensitive and soothing and can really be like a natural pain reliever through the body. And I know that can also, not every bleed welcomes that. But if you feel that there is a lot of energy there, if you can go into a practice for yourself, not to get anything out, not to get a peak experience, but you might slowly work yourself up, that can be like a beautiful tonic through the body that actually just like clears, it's just like a cleansing the central channel.
Well, I think for even people to know that having that heightened sensation there, or even a higher sex drive, or those sort of things during that time can be normal or can be for you for that particular one. And I think a lot of people, I mean, certainly growing up, that was like, what are all the names? Aunt Molly's here, and what did we call it? Aunt Flo is here. We don't. When you're younger, you wouldn't want your partner to know, like pretend like everything's just fine.
Men get like this badge of honor for having sex during this time. And it's like, like they were given this badge and you're like, oh, okay. Because was it they did you a service by like having sex with you during this time because it's so gross?
Yeah, see, the conditioning is so twisted. Like having sex when you're menstruating, I also find that even if we'll have like, let's say a higher sex drive when, like while we're bleeding, sometimes the thought of someone else entering, even if it is the person you love more than anyone, the body closes because sometimes there is that deep inner, like, this is for me and only me. I don't need to tell anyone about it. No one else is involved. And there can be a beautiful reclamation of our own sexuality through that. And also sometimes, again, you might feel that intuitive hit of like, ooh, I would love to share this with my partner. And hopefully you're choosing a partner who deeply reveres your body and does see it as a privilege to be inside of you when you're in the most wise, the veil is thin, your body is supple and surrendered and open. Like, it is a gift to be inside of a woman when she is bleeding. You are being drenched in the oracle and like enter.
Okay, let's bring it down just a little bit. So if my partner's listening, he's drenched in the oracle, he doesn't know what that means.
So good.
Having an open-hearted conversation with your partner. I'm going on this journey of reclaiming this for myself. And this time, I'm really going to need you to show up in this way. Like, it would mean the world to me. Like, these are just more practical conversations. If a woman's listening and you're like, well, what about my partner? Because this is a real thing where women want to go on this journey for themselves, but they're like, well, my partner and my children, and like, I'm constantly around so many people. So how do I reclaim this for myself? And I think it's first that choice of reclaiming it for yourself. And instead of being like, hey, like, sometimes when you'll bring something to your partner and it's like this kind of like, hey, like I'm already bringing it in this way of like, I know this is stupid and not important, but it's like, what if we actually just own it from a soft, open-hearted way of like, this is deeply important to me. This is so healing for me. This is what I need from you. I would love for you to just be in the room with me while I am, massaging my own body with soft music, with candles, and just like really feeling into my womanhood and my bleed. Or maybe it's, hey, I really need space today. Like, I'm feeling super inward and it's going to be really nourishing for us if I have this day for myself. And so I think just also those open-hearted conversations of owning your needs without demand or entitlement, but like deeply knowing yourself.
I found that when I sleep alone during my bleed, at least for 2 nights, that keeping that energy into my own self was really important. And that has just felt so good. And it's not like a practice where it has to be like that all the time. But that whenever I do that, I'm like, oh, it just feels so nourishing. And I wake up feeling so much more energized and more attuned to myself and my needs.
Yes. Yeah. And something I've noticed around, I've been with my husband for 5.5 years. Well, we've only been married for a year. In the beginning, I remember trying to kind of explain what was happening in my body. And I'm like, you're kind of like navigating this, like, do I have to explain everything that's happening? But I have different needs and whatever. And I found that actually just owning that for myself and allowing her and like the beauty of the bleed and like my own connection, allowing the embodiment of that to spill into our relationship did way more than any convincing.
Yeah, like we don't have to tell everybody everything. Like we just don't. Although
I'm on a podcast where I tell everybody everything.
Especially the refined wisdom and the refined energetic understanding that we come to know within ourselves. I think a lot of that is for us. There's times to talk. You just know. And then you also get to trust yourself. Hey, this feels like it needs to be shared in this specific context to this specific person or people. And then we also come to know that and trust when that is supposed to be like that. Yeah, there's just so much we can talk about. And I don't think our partners or anyone, they're not us. Nobody else is us. And we don't need anyone else to fully understand us. And I think that's another thing just about relationships in general, where sometimes it's so much pressure. We think they have to know everything about us or every part of us, or we think we have to know everything about them. It's like, but we don't. And a lot of things, that deeper connection, I actually think happens in the silence. It happens between the words, and coming to know that that's okay. We don't have to describe and talk about and know each other from a verbal way.
The sensations that we feel, often there are no words, right? So it is going to come out with just our actions and how we are and how we're behaving and how we're connecting with the people around us. And that's not going to come from us telling, it's going to come from us just being around them. And they're going to feel that. And then that, by them being able to feel that, that's sharing without having to say.
For any man listening who is in a relationship with a woman and you want to understand her bleed more, my advice would be don't try to understand it, but try to learn her body more deeply and know that it is like the feminine and the mysteries of blood is something that is, it's one of the most unexplainable phenomenon of women, I believe. Like even the red tent for me felt like it touched. I don't know if either of y'all have read it, but it felt like it touched certain threads that I was like it found the words I was looking for. And still, there is so much more vastness and mystery. And so I think when you try to understand your woman, you miss it. Can you just actually be in reverence of the mystery of her and attune to her and notice when she softens or lights up and follow that, because her body is really wise. And when she's bleeding, her wisdom can lead the family if you allow it to. I think men really understanding the reverence is the biggest piece. I hope that that helps, because I think that so many men, I know so many great men who want to, as women are also rising into their deep power, there's this surge of men also reclaiming that. And, I think they want to understand us. We are just also, we're working with a body that is mysterious. So just, go slow.
I think there's a place for men to support women when they're just starting on this path. And because men also notice things that are going on with you. Like it's not as if it's a secret when you're living in a household with someone that you're bleeding. It's happening. Everyone knows, even if you're trying to hide the blood or keep it to yourself, everyone knows. So I think there is a place for men that if you are just starting, for them to support you in that, in your noticing the blood, in saying like, hey, I've noticed that your menstruation is 14 days long, like you're bleeding for 14 days. Is this something we should be looking at a little bit here? Like, I'm here to help you in the sense, like, if you need to look at it, like, feel free. It's not, you don't have to hide this from me. You don't necessarily need to talk about it, but as a man, I think there is that opportunity for them to say, I'm also noticing things, and being gentle and kind about it. I mean, you don't, there's other ways that it's often shared, but I think there is that place for men to support women in that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like, if you're with a really great partner and a great man, he wants you to expand into the fullness of you. He wants you to be in the most nourished, vital version of yourself. And so if you are on a journey of sharing that or wanting to be more in that and your partner is completely unreceptive, I would say look at if you're with the right person, because the right person deeply wants that for us. It doesn't mean they're always going to get it totally right, but there's a difference between a man who feels burdened by a woman's mystery and a man who is, again, in reverence of it, even if he doesn't understand. And so I love, Danita, that you brought that in because, yeah, there's something so like my body relaxes when I feel into men who deeply want their woman to be thriving and nourished. You know, what man wouldn't? So I don't know. I think that for the ladies listening, yeah, like our partners, we choose our partners and there are great men out there and you don't have to settle for someone who is burdened by your body's brilliance.
I was going to say, and bringing in the curiosity, whether that's from our partner or just for ourselves, or whether it's there's a man listening to this who wants to support his partner in this way, and she's not listening to this. Painful bleeds, clotting bleeds, blood that's brown. Like there's a lot of things that we have just grown up thinking that this is normal. And I'm not saying this isn't normal. Like that it actually is normal because that's what a lot of people have and feel. But it's that knowing that there's something with that our body is trying to tell us, whether that's an emotional change we need to make, a nutritional change we need to make, whether we need support from healthcare practitioners or whatever that is. But knowing that like it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't, and just opening ourselves to that. There could be something different. There could be another way to live. There could be changes to make that actually make these few days a month actually really nourishing and amazing and, allowing us to go into the end of a cycle, the death, and to be rebirthed every month in great reverence and an honor to do that, really.
Men bringing that curiosity, that might be their starting point too. If they're not accustomed to this, if they've never heard of anything that we've just talked about ever in life.
And if they somehow made it through this podcast, love you, men, really.
Now they're listening at minute 50 some. We love you. This is actually like a really cool opportunity for them to start their own journey within whatever this means for them and their relationship. This might have been a burden for them. Like their whole life, they've been taught that this is a burden. This is meant to be a burden. This is how it is. It is a death. They're not accustomed to like the rebirth of what that means. So they just see it as straight death. And then, whatever that means for them or whatever they've been taught, this can be like a really cool opportunity for them to just really get curious, like Brea said, and be like, what does this mean?
Yeah. And then
actually?
they can also have more curiosity around their own bodies and their own like wild primordial biology that is different than ours, So I think there can also be this mutually beneficial place, of like the more you nourish your woman's wildness, the more your masculine wildness is also going to come online. And like I've just watched men really like also come deeper into their own personal power through the reverence because it erects that natural instinct to be a protector, to be a holder of woman. And so I think there is, again, this like beautiful divine union through this.
Amy used the word erect. So I'm like, oh.
She used the word men, primal, and erect. I'm like, hey, yo, this feels good to me.
This is the next one for sure.
We are going to wrap it up, but I just wanted to say this was amazing. This was a great conversation. And I think this is ending it with just the idea of being curious. Coming onto this podcast is just like one more curiosity, listening to this, hearing it and saying, okay, like, does this apply to me? Does this not apply? How does this work for me? How does it feel? And if at any point you were triggered today, because there is different things that'll be like, ooh, I don't know about this one.
Yeah, Amy, thank you so much for being here and for just showing up as yourself and this part of your life, which is you, which is a reflection of you. Really appreciate it so much. There's so many other things I want to talk about. So I think we're going to have to have you back. We're going to have to go into some of these rabbit holes and explore. And I also really appreciate everybody listening to this and making it through to the end here, because this is not common conversation. There's a lot there. But it's fun and it's different. And I think there is something for us all to get to know and deepen within ourselves over time. and in a really light, fun way. This does not have to be serious.
It doesn't, because like we said, at the end of life, what do you want to do? You want to look back and be like, I enjoyed it.
Yes, exactly. No, I appreciate y'all too for having me here. And this was so much fun and it was real good. So thank you to everyone who listened. And
if you want to check out Amy, you can check out, she has social media.
Instagram is where you'll find all of the links to all of the offerings I've got going on. So that'll be the best place to reach me.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Self-Woven. You can find us on our website, selfwoven.com, to learn more about our community, where we link people embracing their unrefined, unpolished, and unrestricted way of living. Those who are looking to explore their unique energetic, spiritual, and physical essence. This is where we go deeper and share opinions and celebrate our deeper layered experiences, and where we connect in embracing authenticity, deepening our connection to ourselves and the world around us. And also, here is our disclaimer that this information shared is our opinions and experiences and is not medical advice. There has been no client relationship established, and the use of this information is at the user's own risk and does not substitute for any mental health or medical diagnosis or treatments.